Hello everyone and welcome to our channel CareersTalk. I am Suren Sharma, an agile consultant based in Netherlands, and today we are going to discuss Scrum Master questions asked as Wipro shared by WhatsApp group member. And to help us with the answer, we have invited Anvita Prabhu. You might seen her last two times in two different sessions. Yes. Okay, so friends, but before we begin, if you are new here, please subscribe to our channel. We have tons of valuable content for you. And if you find this session informative, which I am sure you will, please hit that like button. Okay, so without further delay, let's get started. Let's dive in. So welcome, Anvita, and thank you for joining us today. Anvita, over to you.
Thank you, Sudan. Thank you once again for giving me this opportunity. And I'm maybe people are seeing me on and on in your show, and this is a great opportunity, I would say. And thank you. I would be as explanatory as possible as usual. So even today, I would I would explain as much as possible, and this might help multiple Scrum Masters to come up with best possible answers for their interviews, right? So
Yeah.
thank you once again, Sunil, for giving me this opportunity.
Wonderful. So if you allow, shall we start?
Sure, yes.
Okay. So the very first one is, can you describe a situation where you are assigned to assess the organization readiness for the agile transformation? It's a readiness, okay? So what steps would you take to evaluate the readiness? And what were the indicators that either support you or opposed you moving forward with the agile transformation? So yeah, I mean, over to you, Anvita.
Yeah, first of all, when we talk about agile transformation, it is not just, 1 month, 2 months program, right? It is a longer duration wherein you have to have a shift in the process. You need to have a shift in the mindset of people, and you need to have a strategic shift also, right? First thing I would like to consider is that first we need to question to the organization whether we are in a good shape to have a particular dedicated business expert in place, right? For the defined role, which we call as product owner, basically, right? On whom the team can rely on and on whom the team can expect responses from. Let's say you have any of the user story or any of the requirements which needs further discussions or further clarification, the team need to rely on some person to get the feedbacks from the customer, because these product owners are the customer facing, basically. And as a result, what we have to do is that we need to have this dedicated role in place. So we need to question to the organization if the organization is willing to have this particular business expert in place or not for each of the teams, right? That's first thing which we need to analyze. And the second thing is the organization willing to have a dedicated team in place, right? When we say team, it should be a cross-functional team which comprises of UI developers, backend developers, testing team, as well as automation teams and architects involved. And even the Scrum Master roles should be present, product owner roles should be present, and sometimes, yes, business analyst roles are also present in some of the organizations, right? So you need to have a proper team dynamics. Now, when we speak about this team dynamics, we are basically focusing on, a dedicated team. It should not be that a team is focusing on 50% on one project and the 50% on the other project. Let's say 30% on one project and the 30% on other project and 40% on some other project, right? What happens when you have such sort of team is that the basic values of Scrum is being, or any of the frameworks is being violated, right? You will not have that much commitment towards the team, and you will not have a better collaboration. You will not even have that openness to discuss maybe with your stakeholders, maybe with your product owners or anyone within the team, right? And you wouldn't even have that team bonding, because of which you might even develop the respect within which is required within the team, right? So that's the reason we need to first analyze if the organization is willing to have this dedicated team or not. And the third aspect which we need to consider is that, like I've already mentioned, sometimes business analyst roles also come into picture in some of the organizations, wherein the product owner might delegate some of the works and get things done. So it's also important to analyze whether we'll have such roles in place from the organization. And the other aspect is that we see in most of the organizations, right? Like multiple roles are assigned to same person. Like a developer is also working as Scrum Master, sometimes developer is also working as product owner. So we need to understand if the organization is willing to have dedicated roles in place. When we say dedicated role, it is basically a specified role. A developer means he or she should be focused on their development activity, not the other activities, n number of activities. One of the best example is that in our previous organizations also, it so happened that one of the backend developer, he was working as a developer and a scrum master. So he hardly had time to focus on his development activity, wherein he used to block his calendar after 5 p.m. or something, 5 p.m. IST, and then he used to work on his development activity. So this basically hampers the focus and commitment what people might have towards the particular team, right? Even Scrum Master role also has to be a dedicated role. It should not be like you will have a dual roles and you'll be working in multiple teams at a time, right? So that if the organization is ready to have such roles or not, that is one more aspect. And what is the way in which the team, organization emphasizes on collaboration? That is very important to consider, because it so happened that some of the organizations follows hierarchy, right? Wherein let's say a subordinate will report if he or she has some concern, they'll report it to their team lead, and then team lead will take some approvals from manager, and so on. It goes like that. So it should not be such pattern when you follow agile, wherein when you follow agile and provide the incremental delivery very quickly, right, in a quicker manner. So as a result, you have to ensure that you have such collaborations frequently with the stakeholder, with the product owner, and within the team as well. So that is one more aspect onto what sort of collaboration mode the organization would support. And there's one more question which we need to emphasize is that what is the time box which is being allotted for the project? That is also important, right? Sometimes the project delivery would be like it would take some 6 months, 7 months, and so on. But in case of agile, it's the requirements are very dynamic in nature, and as a result, you need to have incremental deliveries which are provided every now and then, like every within the duration of 1 month sprint, if you call it as, right? So that's one more aspect. What is the organization willing to have certain time box for the delivery of the particular iteration? And then there is a necessity to maintain certain discipline within the organization structure also. When I say discipline, it's again one person should not be assigned with multiple roles. And even the hierarchical fashion, if you follow, most of the time it adds delay onto delivery, right? And these are the aspects which we need to consider. And moreover, set with all these things, then next comes the training, right? In case, for example, in our organization, there was a transformation onto safe completely, like in my previous organization. So when we do a safe transformation, it is important that, or any of the transformation, it is important that people who are involved in, engaged in that work are well aware of what exactly it is, right? So necessary training should be given, right? So ideally, in most of the organization, we hire agile coaches in case of it is a transformation culture like SAFE, right? We had agile coaches in place who would formulate and who would create a roadmap and who would have set of aspects which they have planned over a certain duration of time. Like it was like almost 1.5 1 year cross, almost 1.5 years of journey. It was like in order to completely transform every individual and completely train every individual. We have given all the certifications which is necessary, like role specific certifications. For product owner it's different, for scrum master it is different, architects it's different, and developers it's different. So everything we need to keep in consideration. And even we need to engage the team in such a way that we need to consider even all the events, like all the events associated with any of the frameworks you consider. For example, scrum or safe or whichever the scrum framework you're using, you need to have all the events in place. It is not to be consider less important as compared to the development activities. So we need to educate the team. That is also an important aspect I would consider. So yeah, I think overall these are all the aspects which we need to consider for agile transformation.
Wonderful, Anvita. I think you have touched base each and every aspect, the component of the
Yeah. Thank
transformation. So, if I have to just summarize quickly,
you.
especially on the readiness part. So,
Mm,
the thing which you mentioned about that we have to initially we have to have a discussion with our stakeholders. So, of course, that's
yeah.
begin by conducting one-on-one interviews with the key stakeholders across various levels. There will be
Mm,
senior management, there will be a team leaders, developers,
mm,
business user, right? So basically, this will help us. This will help us to understand their expectations from the agile, any past experience with the agile methodology, and what is their willingness to embrace all these changes, right? So
mm,
I think that's you have mentioned. You also mentioning about assessing the current processes. So we have to perform a thorough review of the current project management and the development processes which we have.
mm,
We should focus on how to this particular work was planned, executed, and delivered over a period of time. And when we look into whether the teams are already using agile kind practices, let's say they are already using daily scrum calls or daily stand-ups or whatever they call it, or if they are using, for example, iterative development, or they are using some sort of retrospective, so it's easy for us to just map, tell them that okay, oh, it is something which you already doing it, let's do it more formally, things like that. So we should do the current process, overall process assessment is also needed, what exactly these people are
mm,
doing as of now. And you also touch base upon, I think, the cultural assessment. So agile transformation heavily rely on cultural shift. So basically, we assess the organizational culture
mm,
by observing their day-to-day interaction, their leadership style, their decision-making processes, and their
mm,
communication patterns. Right. So, where the team open to the feedback, or did management support collaboration, autonomy, or the environment are more hierarchical in nature, which you have also covered. Right. So that's the third part. We have to do the cultural assessment, and the next one is about the capability and the skill set. So we evaluate whether the team had the right skill set to transition into agile. So, for example, we have specific roles: product owner, scrum master, or cross-functional team. So, apart from that, we also assess their technical capability. So, whether the team is aware about what is CI/CD, what is automation testing, what is iterative development. So, these kind of assessment we normally do. And lastly, we also touch base on tooling and the infrastructure readiness, because organization need uh, different tools. So we will analyze the organization current tools and infrastructure to see if they can support the agile workflows or not.
mm,
And this include looking at their issue tracking tools, their version control systems, or their automation capabilities, right? Just to check if they could adapt to an agile environment. So that's also something which will come under the part of readiness. And then, of course, we have to set up the pilot team. We always not going with the bring back approach. So we, as a part of evaluation, we proposed setting up of a pilot agile team to run a few sprints, and this allow us to observe how teams responded to the new methodology, and we can identify potential blocker early on with the help of these one or two teams which are the part of this pilot team. So this all these points come under our readiness part, and the indicators which going to help us to move forward or going to hold us back are,
mm,
so if we got the leadership support, so if our senior management are fully committed to this particular transformation and they demonstrate a clear understanding of the benefit of the agile, right, that could bring into their organization, so that support is very much is needed. So if
mm,
they are open to allocate different resources for training and tooling, whatever is required to this transition, so that kind of support we need to move forward. That's of course is needed. And then of course we have to maybe with some teams we have to experiment with agile events like daily scrum calls, things like that, which shows that organization was not entirely new to the agile principles, right? So we should
mm,
leverage their existing agile best practices, whatever in that sort. And lastly, yes, if the organization has a feedback oriented culture, which teams already conducting, let's say, some post project reviews, So that's going to really help us to change it a little bit, adoption of the retrospective. So if team is already doing some, root cause analysis workshop or something like that, or post project reviews, we can leverage that as a kind of retrospective for them, so we can map those kind of events with the things which they are already doing. So that will come under the cultural fit, like they are open for feedback, right? So these are the few indicators. The challenge which normally we have is, of course, there are a lot of people who are not willing to change, and it's okay, because some people, for it's, agile is not for everyone, honestly. Like, you have to be on your toe every time, and I mean, you have to deliver, so every 2 weeks you have something to deliver, right? So it may be difficult for some of the people to adapt this kind of new lifestyle, I would say. So there will be a kind of resistance in the middle management, or maybe some senior engineers, developers, right? So they can express their concern about losing control, or they are not clear with the roles, because here they have team lead or different kind of roles, but when they go into this scrum team, they have just developers, right? So they need lot of extensive retraining, and things like that. So these are the indicator which hold backs all these kind of transformation. Agile knowledge, lack of agile knowledge is again, lot of team members lack a clear understanding of agile principles and frameworks, right? They have some perceived mindset, okay, agile is about this and this. So we have to train them from scratch. That's again one of the important thing. These are the indicator which hold us back. There might be a gap in the tooling. Maybe the organization is not well enough in that position to to buy those kind of tools which are not agile friendly. So because the significant investment on the new tools for modification of the existing one, maybe it takes some amount of time to do that, and that's again an indicator which drag us our transformation. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think these are the points which you mentioned, and I just try to summarize them, that okay, all these points are important when we talk about agile transformation. Anvita,
Mm,
good.
well, thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the different question. Okay, so can you share a time when you had to modify the definition of done for your team, and what challenges were you facing that led to this change, and how do you implement the modification of DoD?
So, first of all, I would like to iterate is that what exactly is definition of done, right? Definition of done is basically a set of checklist which emphasizes, which indicates if your product increment, what you're planning to deliver, is it ready or not? Is it, in a fully qualified? Is it qualified to be delivered or not? Basically. So these are certain set of checklists. It could be like, for example, whether the design documents are formulated, whether they are approved, signed and approved, and whether we have unit test cases in place, whether we have done the code reviews or not, whether we have done the testing or not, and whether, what percentage of automation test coverage is done whenever we are planning to deliver any of the product increment, and what is the regression ratio, what is the pass percentage, what are there any critical bugs in place, and are they resolved or not, and have the UAT been done, and what and so on. Like, it has a different set of criteria. It can vary from team to team. Now, what happened in and one more thing is that since it qualifies, it gives you a indication whether your product increment is to be delivered or not. It is not advisable to modify any of the DoD criteria in the middle of the sprint or middle of the iterations. However, there are some of the exceptional cases. Like, for example, in my organization, it so happened that we were basically using Azure DevOps board, and what happened is every team were using their own template of formulating things and their own set of DoD criteria to providing the increments or the iteration by iteration to deliver the set of items to the end customer. So now what happened is, uh, uh, it so happened that, let's say, in my team, the developer, when they are working on any of the items, they mark the status of the user story as active. And then they move it to, let's say, when they're giving to the testing, for testing, they'll mark it as ready for testing or something like that, right? Deployed or ready for testing. Now the other team was following a different strategy. Within the same department, people were following different ways. Like let's say the team B, they had like, during the development cycle, they were like using it as ready for implementation or implementation. And when they were moving to the testing, they were marking it as ready for testing or deployed, something like that. Now here, what happened is we had a strategy to have a generic template for the entire department. So as a result, what happened is they had also integrated within Azure DevOps about the DoD criteria also, what each of the team need to follow. Now, why I'm specifying this is that due to this transformation structure or due to this generalizing the template for ADO, what happened is that everyone started following the same DoD criteria. As a result, when we are giving the end product to the customer, right? So ours is basically a medical based organization. So when we give it to the end customer, everyone abides by that DoD criteria. So now what happens is, let's say in my team, the developer moves the status from active to ready to testing. What happens is there will be a pop-up which is displayed like, did you finish this? Is the unit testing done? Is the code review done for your code? So it gives a reminder to the developer so as to what has to be done as a part of DoD criteria. At the same time, it will also indicate the quality across the department. So this is one of the case which I've mentioned, wherein you can modify the DoD criteria and formalize the same structure throughout. There are other scenarios also. For example, like let's say you have incurred some of the issues in the UAT cycle, or let's say issue in the production cycle because of the unclear DoD criteria. Now, why I'm specifying this is that because let's say you didn't mention a checklist of let's say regression or let's say automation in your DoD criteria. Now it is unclear, right? Now your development team or the team members, they have done whatever is mentioned in the as a part of checklist and they have delivered. Now, what happens is, let's say, I think most of us undergo this sort of issues which incur in most of the applications, like intermittent issues, right? Sometimes it is seen, sometimes it is not seen. So such things are not easily identified due to during our regular unit testing or regular testing, right? It has to be, you have to undergo like, rigorous testing wherein automation might be required in place. Let's say your DoD criteria doesn't have that automation checklist itself, and the team didn't do it, right? Unclear DoD criteria. As a result, you have seen this particular issue in the production server, and this is very important for the customer. Now, what happens? It is a drawback, right? So, as a result, what we can do is we can, in such scenarios, we can modify the DoD criteria and we can have a stringent DoD criteria so that the team abides by that. And moreover, we ensure that the quality checks have been formulated and the readiness is achieved for any of the product increment. And the second aspect is that when people take shortcuts, it mostly happens because of the timeline, time crisis. What you have, like, you have set of user stories which has to be completed within the given timeline. You take a shortcut. You will not do unit testing. You will straight away give it to the testing team, and testing team also might have missed out some of the test cases wherein they will say that yes, this might work, this worked last time, it might work this time also, and henceforth you will give it. And then there will be some issues which is seen in UAT in productions, right? Or in let's say going forward, which you have not identified within the team. So in such cases also we need to have some modifications across the DoD criteria. And third aspect is that when the team gets matured, right, it can be a possibility that you modify some of the DoD criteria, wherein to ensure better quality of the particular product, whatever is being delivered. And as in when you learn also in Agile, it's always a learning curve, right? Every iterations, every sprints, you keep learning and you adapt onto that, right? Which we term it as inspect and adapt. So all these things comes into picture, and as in when you learn also, you can modify some of the DoD criteria and have a better quality product what we deliver, so as to win the trust of the stakeholders, right? And another aspect is that whenever you jeopardize the delivery, right, in that case also it's sometimes possible wherein you are not able to deliver within the given timeline, or with maybe in such cases it's not advisable though, but in such cases also it's possible to have certain modifications in the DoD criteria. So these are all the aspects. These are all the best examples I would say when you can modify the DoD criteria.
Great, Anvita. I think
Yeah,
you have covered most of the examples, so I don't want
yeah,
to add anything over here.
yeah.
It's already elaborated answer. Okay, let's move
Thank you.
on then. Okay, so yeah, this one is little tricky and different.
Mm,
So the question is, tell me about a time when you applied principles of Scrum that you have learned outside the Scrum guide, right?
mm.
And how do you incorporate them in your daily work? And how do you influence your team to perform better with the help of these principles? Anvida?
Yeah. For this question, I think we all have gone through the Scrum guide and we have seen values. Principles are out of Scrum guide most of the time. Yeah. So principles, when we speak, first is on there are six basic principles of Scrum. So one of them is like empirical process control. Now, what exactly is empiricism, right? Empiricism, we emphasize mostly on analyzing the work by observations and experimentation, which we generally do in Agile, right? So it's not that whenever you deliver a particular product increment, it should be like 100% accurate. You learn from that. Like it's, I'm not telling that the quality has to be hampered in this particular answer, whereas you will learn what went wrong and how you can improvise on each of the stages in each of the sprints. So this is on to the empiricism. Now this have certain pillars when we talk like transparency. It speaks about inspection. It speaks about adaptation, right? It has three pillars. Now, what is this transparency? When we speak about transparency, it's basically onto the openness what you have or the collaboration what you have with the stakeholders, with the product owners within the team, and with the let's say you have a dependencies between the teams, right? In that case, you need to have the transparent communication so as to highlight what exactly we are going through and what could be the impedance what the team has and how we can come up with these things, right? We all follow this generally. I think we all follow this during our daily scrums, or maybe in any of the sprint planning also we showcase what exactly are the blockers and how we have to implement it, how we can improvise over our product goals, and so on. Now, coming on to the inspection. Inspection, as the name suggests, we are inspecting. We are basically identifying what are the improvisations with respect to the tools, with respect to the technology, with respect to the collaborations, communications within the team, across the team. And we are also mentioning on what are the process changes that we need to implement, right? We need to identify those things. Now, identification comes under inspection aspect. And then comes on to the adaptation. When we say adaptation, we are making the modifications that is necessary in each of the cycle or each of the sprint. And then we will come up with what is the best possible solution we can give it in the next sprint or next iteration. That is onto the adaptation part with respect to all these aspects or the terms which I mentioned. Like it could be technology, it could be process, it could be communication, collaborations, right? Or the environment, culture, right? All these aspects. Now, second aspect is on the collaboration. Second principle, it speaks about collaboration. When we speak about collaboration, again, the team need to have that openness to discuss any of the concerns within the team, outside the team, or if you have, let's say, external dependencies, then also you need to have that openness. Collaboration should be there. Otherwise, it will add on to your, incomplete delivery, or maybe you might have, it might add on to your increments, right? Basically we call it as technical debts, right? So we might have foresee such things when we have lack of communication or collaborations within the team or with the stakeholders or with the product owners and across the teams. That's very important. And then third aspect is that time boxing. All the scrum events, when we consider, it's all time box events. It's not like let's say for example, consider sprint planning. Sprint planning, when we say, it's as per the scrum guide, it's like 8 hours for a 1 month sprint. However, if your sprint duration is, let's say, 15 days, then it is 4 hours. And then you have a daily scrum, which is the 15 minutes event. And then you have sprint reviews, which is basically approximately 4 hours event for a 1 month sprint duration. And if it is lesser than that, let's say 15 days, then it's basically onto 2 hours. And then you have retrospective, sprint retrospective, which is basically 3 hours duration for a 1 month sprint. And when you consider it as 15 days event, then it time box events, which we need to consider in some of the team's backlog refinements, which is out of the Scrum events. However, this is also one of the major events which we do it every now and then. And apart from that, we also have a value-based prioritization as one more principle, wherein it basically speaks about, it's not that you have a defined set of user stories throughout. Like, let's say for 3-4 sprints, you don't have a defined set of user story. You need to refine them every now and then. When I say every now and then, definitely when you have sprint reviews, you go about refinement, you take the customer feedback, and then you reprioritize those things, and then you go about what has to be considered as a priority in the next upcoming sprint. It's not like fully defined, right? So reprioritization and value-based prioritization we need to do. And then it comes onto the incremental development or iterative development, right? Every iterations you need to have a certain value you need to deliver to the end customer, right? It should not be like partially completed, or it should not be like you're providing certain very technical aspects and you're not providing any of the useful information to the customer, right? You need to have an iterative development. In every iterations you need to add some value to the customer. Basically, this speaks about adding value to the end customer. And I think I have covered most of the principles. I think these are some of the aspects.
Yep. Thank you, Anvita, for this detailed, elaborated answer. Okay, that's great.
So thank you.
Okay, so let's move on. So think of a project where you have to decide whether you have to use agile or not. So how you are going to evaluate that this particular project basically suitable for agile, right? There might be some trends or the parameters which you have, right? So, or maybe there might be the scenario when this particular project is not fit for the agile. So how do you know about all this, Anvita?
Okay, so basically, when we talk about agile, it's not important that every project has to undergo agile, and every project abides by these set of activities like transparent communication and iterative developments, whatever we have mentioned in the previous question project you're holding. When I say type of project, it mainly focuses on the complexity. How large is the project? When it is intended to deliver, right? Those are the aspects which we need to consider. And what is the scope of the project? That is also very important to be considered. Whether it is like, in short duration, they need to be provided, or whether it has to be, whether it has a longer duration, and what is the team dynamics you have, right? As I mentioned in my previous answers, it's very important to have a cross-functional team in place to follow agile, right? So you need to have a team dynamics. At the same time, you need to also analyze on the culture of the particular, or the environment of the particular organization. When we say environment, what is the collaboration, how it collaborates with the stakeholders, and basically onto we are organization. Now, for example, let's say example of some of the projects, like it could be manufacturing firms, it could be construction firms. In such cases, you can't go for agile. Why? Because it's like you have to abide by certain compliance and regulatory aspects, right? You can't deliver it incrementally and dynamically as we focused on agile aspects. So what happens? You need to abide by all the regulatory compliances before giving it to the end customer. Otherwise, it is not being accepted by the end customer, right? So it is not a dynamic way of accepting the requirements here in these firms. And second aspect is that even you will mostly see a hierarchical fashions itself, hierarchical way of communicating or collaboration in most of the manufacturing firms, in most of the construction firms, right? And you would also have certain roles which are not as per the agile. Let's say you wouldn't have product owners in place, you would have some team manager, or you would have some managers in place who would take the requirement, and again it would follow the hierarchical fashion, and you wouldn't have specific roles which are assigned, right, in such firms. So this is an example wherein you cannot go into agile. Once we say where we cannot focus on agile, it is very easy to understand where we can focus on agile. So the exact, reverse of these things will follow agile. Mostly in agile, the requirements, right, it has to be dynamic in nature. For example, best example during Diwali is Amazon, Flipkart, or any of the online shopping. If you see, there was a Dasara sale, and then now it is like Diwali sale. How quickly the requirements are changed, how quickly they have analyzed what end customer would need, right? So this is a dynamic change in the requirement, right? So this is the best example which we can consider, which is agile in nature. And the second example, what I would consider is, most of the firms today undergo agile, wherein you need to also consider the aspects of collaboration. When we say collaboration, as I mentioned, you need to have a stakeholder communication. You need to have a continuous feedback from. You need to get the continuous feedback from the end customer, and you need to reprioritize the stories and provide it to the end customers, and so on. And it's also important to understand the team dynamics, as I mentioned, right? So team dynamics, when we come, you need to have a cross-functional teams in place, wherein you have a certain set of developers, architects, testing, everyone in place and in the same particular project, right? That is very important. Mostly, I think these are the aspects which we need to consider when it comes to what are the projects which might follow agile, right? So I think this is the take from my end, Sunan.
Okay, great, Anvida. Yeah, thank you for that. So if anything is
Yeah,
productive, we go with the waterfall approach, and if something is complex,
yeah,
then we'll go with Scrum,
yeah.
Agile. Yeah, okay. Let's move on. So, uh, based on your experience, can you give some example of that how you applied inspect and adapt in any of your project? And if you can tell us what is that kind of problem which you have faced and how you make sure that your team is managed it or handle it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think inspect and adapt is there in every events of Scrum, right? Or any of the framework for that matter, right? What exactly is inspect and adapt? As I mentioned in my previous answers, inspecting is like wherein you analyze what could be the improvisations or the changes which we need to inculcate, whereas adaptation is getting those changes in place. Now, let's say, for example, let me consider the simple example of sprint planning, right? In sprint planning, what is the inspection and adaptation, what you do within the particular team, right? So first thing is we need to analyze what is the capacity of the team, right? That is, you need to inspect onto what would be the capacity. You need to do a planning for that, and you need to do a proper planning estimates within the particular sprint, right? Based on the history, or I would call it as velocity, right? Based on the velocity, you would again go about by estimating what we have done wrong in the previous sprint. We would definitely not take it ahead in this current sprint, right? That is on the inspection part, wherein we would estimate, we would refine it appropriately, right? As per how much ever we can digest, we would take that. And third aspect is that formulating the sprint goal, right? When we formulate the sprint goal, also based on the user stories, based on the estimates what we have derived, we formulate the we come about formulating the sprint goal. Definitely it is we analyze what we can deliver within that particular sprint, and based on that we will set the sprint goal, right? And moreover, these are the aspects on the sprint planning side. And daily scrum also, we go about inspect and adapt, right? Once we inspect, what do? We do about the changes and we implement those changes, right? For example, let's consider the sprint planning itself. Let's say my goal I have overestimated in the last sprint, right? In the sprint, if I do the same thing, what will happen? I'm not doing any changes in the particular sprint. Again, I'll see the same spillovers. Again, I'll see the same issues, which is like recursively going to the next sprint, wherein my performance is not improving. Nothing is improving, right? So you need to adapt based on the inspection what you have done, right? So you need to go about changing those aspects. Let's say I have overestimated in the previous sprint. I have inspected it, I have analyzed it. Yes, this is not what we can take up for this particular capacity. Whereas we need to reduce the number of story points which we can consider. And I adapt it. And then I go about changes. Right? Even in daily Scrum also we have this, wherein we will discuss on to what we have done yesterday, what we are planning to do today, and what are the impediments, right? Impediments also we discuss about, we understand what the roadblock is, and we would give suggestions through collaborations. We would understand how we can resolve each of them, right? So that is on to the inspect and adapt in case of daily Scrum. And review. Review is one of the aspect wherein you would demonstrate onto what you have done in particular iteration or sprint, and then you would take the customer feedback, right? That is onto the inspection part. That comes onto the inspection part, wherein based on the customer feedback, customer will give you feedback saying that this has to be changed accordingly. And let's say you will add some of the enhancements, or let's say some other priorities have been pitched in for the upcoming sprint. So that comes onto the inspection part, wherein the stakeholder will communicate with you onto what changes have to be done, and accordingly you will reprioritize the aspect, as in product owner would reprioritize the aspects based on the team's understanding, and then they would come up with the next sprint or next iteration. That is onto the adaptation part for the sprint review. Then onto the retrospective. Retrospective, we know that what went well, what didn't go well in the particular current iteration, and then we will go about action items, right? So what didn't go well is onto the inspection part, like, right? We understand what didn't go well in the previous iteration. It could be with respect to techniques, with respect to the some of the POCs might take a lot of time, and we haven't come up with any of the best possible solutions in the current sprint, or we have overestimated, or we didn't have some of the documents in place, we didn't have proper acceptance criteria in place, and some of the nth moment, some of the additional items were added, anything, scope creep or anything it could be, right? So what didn't go well, we need to analyze in the current sprint, and then we need to adapt it accordingly, which we term it as action items, what we can do, how we can improve in the upcoming sprint. So in every event it is included. I would give this is onto the generic aspect, I would say. I would give a best example in our organization, wherein, as I mentioned, in my previous organization, we have used SAFE, right? So SAFE is a continuous learning. People were quite unaware of every aspect, all the events. They didn't know what is the importance of each of the events. As compared to the Scrum, SAFE has some additional events also, like you have inspect and adapt, which is done at the every completion of the PI. We have inspect and adapt, wherein we'll have some of the problem solving, wherein we'll understand the issue which is incurred across the department, and common issues which is incurred within across the department, and we'll understand, or within the art level we'll understand what can be formulated and what could be done, possible solutions for the upcoming PI. So similarly, this is one of the example which we have seen in our organization. Similarly, in every event, as I mentioned, we go about inspect and adapt. So yeah, this is the take from my end, Sunan.
Yep. Thank you, Anvida. Yeah, all the events are opportunity to inspect and adapt. Inspect the sprint goal and adapt the plan for that
Yeah.
specific event. Okay, good. And I think let's move on. Yeah, there are different ways to inspect. People use different root cause analysis like five whys or
Mm.
fishbone or things like that, data review, things like that. They adapt.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, this save, right? So we adapt program board.
Yes.
If there is any dependencies,
Yes.
mapping has been done, so we inspect and then we adapt. We had a call with
Yes.
our RTs and just to find out the critical dependencies, right? We do a lot of other things, feature sequencing and things like that, but that's okay. Let's move on. Otherwise, it will take a lot of time. Maybe another session we just focus on safe with you.
Mm.
Okay, so let's move on. So the next question is, yeah, tell me about a time when you introduce Fibonacci CDs for estimation within your team. So what's the significance of Fibonacci and like what's the impact this will have on your estimation process, Anvita?
Yeah. As we all know, I think it's a form of mathematics, right? Fibonacci series we have come across in our programming language, even from childhood days, we have seen Fibonacci series. What exactly it is that when you add two numbers, the succeeding number, what you get, the number is determined by the summation of the previous two numbers. For example, 1 plus 1 when you do, it's 2, of course. And 1 plus 2 when you do, it's 3. And then it forms like 2 plus 3, it's 5, and 8, and 13, and 21, and so on, right? So this is a Fibonacci series, basically. This is a mathematical answer. Now, this particular Fibonacci series is used for estimating. Why? So what does estimation basically infers is that estimation gives us an idea of three different aspects. One is on the effort, another one is on the complexity, and the last one is on the uncertainties. So these three answers it will give us when we estimate a particular user story. Based on that, we will add the story points in Fibonacci series, right? Now, why Fibonacci series? So there's one of the law called as Weber's law. So what it says is that whenever we take a particular percentage of the previous number of the two numbers, we will get approximately 60% difference, right? That's if when you take a percentage of 2 and 3, that's the immediate two numbers, right? 60%. So which means that the user story, which is like a story point, let's say 2, right? The other user story is 3. That means that the one which is in 3 story point is 60% as complex as the one in 2. So here, if you take the difference, right? If you go about the percentage, right? Approximately you'll get 60% itself. So that gives us the accuracy that defines how we can estimate each of the story. It is a relative estimation, definitely. So when we say relative estimation, it is with respect to one story, you estimate the other story, right? And when you add this Weber's law, what happens is when you say the user story is 2 story point and 3 story point, the one with 3 story point is 60% more complex than the one with 2 story point. So you're having some certainty, right? You are having some accuracy. When someone say, the team will have a better form of collaboration in this case, and the team will understand what exactly we need to story point, right? Most of the time we see that in the team there will be a confusion. Developers will give story point as per what development time it would take. Basically there is a misconception that every story pointing is considered in hours, and they think that okay, fine, if it is 2 story point, then I'll consider 2 hours. No, this basically emphasizes on three aspects, that's complexity, effort, and your uncertainties, right? So developers, they analyze based on their developing, and testers, they analyze based on testing. So if we need to come across, to avoid these things, we need to come about a proper estimation technique. That's why we use Fibonacci series. You can also use natural numbers, right? But when you use natural numbers, what happens is, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, use natural numbers, and you wouldn't understand the minor differences what each of the user story would have. When I say this Fibonacci series, you are sure like how complex it is. One user story is with respect to the other one. It'll have a better way of understanding, better, it'll be more certain, and it would add even better collaboration, better decision making, I would say, within the team to analyze, and better way of estimation, right, across. And you wouldn't have most of the spillovers because of such techniques. And in Fibonacci series, it so happened that we are not focusing on some of the minor small changes across, whereas we know that the complexity with respect to one story and the other story has some percentage, right? So as a result, we would focus on the major aspects which would be changed within the next user story, which is more complex than the previous user story. So this is onto the Fibonacci series. So summarizing things, I would say that Fibonacci is basically a way of relative estimation. When we say relative estimation, it is estimating one user story with respect to the other user story. And this is being identified with respect to three components: complexity, effort, and uncertainty. And this, why this is important is that it gives you certainty of how complex each of the user story is with respect to the base user story which you consider, right? And third aspect is that it brings up a better collaboration. It brings up a better estimation way, and it reduces the spillover, right? Every iteration or every sprint, it reduces spillover as a result. It would have a, whatever is the committed versus what actually you have completed, that would be like almost, you will see that, coming in line, as in your burn down chart also would be in line, right, with the idle as well as the actual graph. So all these things come into picture, and which basically focuses on the certainty of the particular stories. So yeah, this is my take on Fibonacci series.
Wonderful, Anvita. I think you covered it pretty well. You have captured
Yes.
all the major points about accuracy,
Yeah.
predictability, sizing, uncertainty, consistency. So that's really
Yeah.
great. Cool. Let's move on to the last question for the day, which is if you can share some of your improvements, major improvements which you have done as a team in your PI events. It's from SAFE,
Mm.
as you already worked with the SAFE project into the past. So if you can share, yeah, a couple of improvements which you have done and how this improvement is going to affect the team performance. So that will be great.
Yeah. So as I've already mentioned, maybe in the previous video, what is PI planning and what are the events which are involved. So PI is nothing but program increment, which is basically used a terminology which is used in SAFE, right? SAFE framework. So wherein you will have multiple teams involved who are working together on a particular product goal, right? So here, what happens is that in the initial PI planning event, it so happened that we were quite new to the SAFE framework. As I mentioned, we have undergone the SAFE transformation, right? So for the first PI planning, it so happened that we have kept Miro board for formulating for formulating all the user stories across multiple iterations, right? We'll have 5 iterations which are planned for 10 weeks duration in a PI planning event, and we have formulated all the user stories within that, and we had all the dependencies which were formed in the program board, and then we had all the risks which are formulated. Everything was maintained. We had all PI objectives, committed, uncommitted PI objectives, everything in place in Miro board, and we were working in the Azure DevOps board, right? What happened is, eventually going forward, the team lost connection, like, as in only product owner and the scrum master were aware what is going on in Miro board, and the team was least bothered about it. Whatever the product owner gives in, they were taking it, and they were not even checking if it aligns by the PI objective or not. Whatever the sprint goal is being set, they used to blindly trust on the product owner. No one were referring onto the Miro board. So it so happened that there came a double maintenance, right? So every time product owner himself used to go and check all the PI objectives which were done, and some of the changes which were formulated in the particular iteration, definitely reprioritization takes place, right? So as a result, moving the user stories from one sprint to the other sprint in the team level board was also very tedious task, and we couldn't do that. And as a result, this was the first PI planning, and we were okay with that to consider. However, in the second iteration, PI planning, what we did is that it's a wonderful tool, integrated tool, which is provided by Solidify, which is Scale. So, which is an integrated tool for Azure DevOps. So, what we did is that we took sufficient training from the external Solidify partner, and we understood that how we can do all these activities which we did it in Miro board in Azure DevOps. So we formulated the PI objectives, we created the dependencies, interdependencies between the teams which are involved in art, right? And we also had we could set up a clear board. Now, what happened is, with this scale integration, what happened is, let's say your dependency is in the next sprint, okay, next iteration, and your user story is in the previous iteration as per your planning in the PI planning, right? So it would show in the red highlight saying that you cannot proceed because your dependency is in the next sprint, next iteration. So it would show all the dependency in Azure DevOps board itself. Because of this, we have achieved clear transparency, not just for the higher management, not just for the LACE team, right? Lean Agile team, Whereas not just for the RTE, not just for the Scrum Master, but for the entire team, right? Entire team were aware, okay, fine, I can't consider this particular user story here because the dependency is in the next iteration mapped. So it would show in a red highlight, see, saying, no, you cannot proceed. But if in case the dependency was in the previous iteration, and let's say the story point, the user story is in the next iteration, then it would highlight in blue color, indicating that, yes, you're good to go, provided you resolve the dependency. So it was a very clear indication. This was a major change which we have done. And it took some time for everyone to adapt because the initial go was that the Azure board looked little clumsy though, because all the dependencies were there, all the user stories were there, and team was not quite happy with that. They're like, we don't know what to move here and there. It's like too many things are there. But we again, had control, like what team is supposed to see and what Scrum Master is supposed to see, what product owner can modify. So we have assigned certain role-based permissions in Azure DevOps, and as a result, it became a very smooth go, and we didn't have double maintenance. We completely stopped using Miro board for this aspect, right? Everything was integrated in ADU, and we got sufficient training also. So, which is a very nice change, I would say. And the second aspect is that, as I mentioned, like the safe transformation itself was a very big change which the team had taken up. Everyone, including the developers, product owners, architects, it could be Scrum Master, everyone had role-based training, certifications, which is a major change, I would say, major transformation. And every now and then, the agile coaches who were in our organization were also very good enough, and they were like very interactive enough. And anytime the team or anyone, even a junior, would have gone and approached the team, they were helpful enough, right? And even we had LACE team, like Lean Agile of Center of Excellence, right? So this team was dedicated to undergo any trainings. Let's say if there are any new joinees or who are totally grads, who are totally unaware of what Agile is, what Scrum is, etc. Right? So they had particular trainings, particular certifications, which they spent a lot, I would say. Right? The organization have spent a lot on these things. These are the two aspects which I would consider for PI, which I've seen basically in the organization.
Wonderful, wonderful, Anvita. Yeah, thank you for your real experience with all of us.
Yeah,
So that's great. And with the end, looks
yeah,
like we comes to an end. Okay.
yeah.
So thank you for sharing your knowledge today, Anvita. And thank you, friends, for joining us for today's session. We hope you found it helpful and informative. And if you enjoy this session, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. We hope to see you in next session. So until then, take care. This is Suran Sharma signing off. Bye bye, and thank you, Anvita, one more time.
Thank you once again, Sunan, for giving me this opportunity. Yeah,
Thank
bye.
you.